With the war in West Asia now in its fourth week, US and Israel continue to bombard Iran, while Iran continues its strikes on Israel and US bases in the Gulf. Let's take a look at the latest developments coming in from the ground. US President Trump has issued a 48-hour deadline to Iran to open the Strait of Hormuz. In a post on Truth Social, Trump said that if Tehran does not open the Strait of Hormuz, then the US will hit and obliterate their power plants. Iran has renewed threats against the region's infrastructure after US President Donald Trump's threats. Iranian military's operational command, Qassam al-Anbiya, said, I quote here, if Iran's fuel and energy infrastructure is violated by the enemy, all energy, information technology and desalination infrastructure belonging to the US and the regime in the region will be targeted. The UK Maritime Trade Operations UKMTO has received a report of an attack on a commercial vessel located about 15 nautical miles north of the coast of United Arab Emirates. The British Maritime Monitor said that a projectile caused the explosion, adding that no injuries have been reported. A British nuclear-powered submarine has reportedly taken position in the Arabian Sea to launch long-range strikes if regional conflict escalates. And according to reports, the submarine HMS Anson is armed with Tomahawk missiles and Spearfish torpedoes. Left Perth earlier in the month and travelled more than 5,000 miles to this region. Israeli health authorities claimed that 75 people have been injured in the southern city of Dimona following multiple Iranian missile strikes. The southern city is home to a nuclear facility. The Israeli army said that the missile struck directly on a building in the city located in the Negev desert. Israel's medical emergency team, Megan David Adam, said that they are treating victims with shrapnel wounds at a number of impact sites.
The position of the Arab and Muslim countries, and I think
Saudi Arabia has given a 24-hour deadline to Iran's military attaché and embassy staff to leave the kingdom due to repeated Iranian attacks on Saudi territory. In a statement on Saturday, the country's Ministry of Foreign Affairs has declared persona non grata on the military attaché of the embassy of Iran to Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia also said that there were three ballistic missiles targeting the region around its capital, Riyadh. The country's defense ministry has said that one of these missiles had been intercepted, while two others fell in uninhabited areas. UAE has said that it is intercepting drones and missiles coming from Iran. In a statement, the country's defense ministry said that it is responding to incoming missiles and drone threats from Iran. The group of 7 nations, G7, has called for an unconditional halt to Iranian attacks on West Asia. Top envoys for the group of 7 advanced economies and European Union, they urged for an unconditional end to Tehran's attacks. In a joint statement, the foreign ministers for Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, United Kingdom and United States and the EU foreign policy chief, they called for cessation of all attacks by the Iranian regime. Pyxis Pioneer, which is a cargo ship carrying liquefied petroleum gas LPG from the US, has arrived in India at New Mangalore port in Mangaluru. The tanker that sailed out of port of Netherlands, Texas on the 14th of February would discharge 16,714 tons of LPG for Aegis Logistics. All right, I'm now going to discuss this further. I'm being joined by Dr. Avner Cohen. He's joining me from Monterey, California, Professor of Non-Proliferation and Terrorism Studies at Middlebury Institute. Dr. Cohen, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for making time. Do you feel these deadlines being set for Iran, latest one saying, and it's coming from Trump on social media, 48-hour deadline, and this is to open up the Strait of Hormuz, and this is after repeated calls to his own allies in NATO and in the West to come and assist in the Strait of Hormuz. Now it's a threat directly to Iran. Do you feel that's the way to submit Iran to US threats?
Well, it's very interesting, that threat. It's obviously a sign of non-patience This was after a day, actually, the president said completely different things. He said that the United States considered to wind down its operations and said that the issue of the Strait of Hormuz is primarily those who use it, and the United States is not one of those countries who use it extensively. So obviously he escalates it. One way to think about it is, and again, we are speculating, is that he would like to push towards a more rift, a more pressure on the Iranian leadership, which so far has been by now dominated essentially by the Revolutionary Guard, and to try to have the more you can call it the softest side, the more leaning for negotiation side within the leadership, including the president, to voice their own view, because those wanted to have some kind of conversation with the United States to negotiate. They were concerned about Iranian attacks on the Gulf states, and it may be that he wants to push those divisions within Iran to the very fore. But essentially, he very much locked himself that within 48 hours, if Iran is not going to make any move, and I don't think that the Revolutionary Guard would like to make a move right now in response, it will be humiliation for them. He is ready to take a very, very severe action.
Dr. Cohen, at this point, and we've been discussing the West Asia crisis since the time it started. And this is not just in the last 3 weeks, since a long time. A lot of the voices and analysts and international voices that come onto our broadcast, they eventually end up telling us, it's Donald Trump, let's not read in too much into what he's saying. He's saying one thing now, he's going to say another thing the day after. And now when this same scenario comes into a conflict as wide as the current one in West Asia, it becomes very, very concerning, because the objectives have always been a big question mark. Now there are differing accounts coming in. But let me quickly go over, as we are having visuals coming in from Israel on the screen as I speak with you. Let's talk about what we have on the screen. The strike on Dimona and Arad. It's once again showing how Iranian missiles are proving American and Israeli air defenses to be porous. Should the duo be taking this as a wake-up call that they've really underestimated Iran's capabilities and they're far from diminished? They may be diminished, but far from over at this point?
It's difficult to say. You're right that in the last two attacks, Israeli air defense simply failed. Israel acknowledged that its interceptor, for some reason, which is going to be investigated, did not take its action. The result was 2 hits in 2 towns, not too far from one another, with essentially nearly 200 casualties. My understanding, no death so far in the counting, but about 200 injured, and huge destruction so far in comparison to what we've done before. It also should be noted that so far the damage in Israel, especially in comparison with what happened in Iran itself, is very, very minor. Israel lost a very small number of people, a few tens of people who were, casualties in injury and the like. But essentially, there is not that much damage. What happened today in Arad and Dimona is quite different. And obviously, it's one of the toughest days for Israel. So we'll see what will happen.
Dr. Cohen, should reining in Israel and US, them reining themselves in, be the way forward? Because Iran has not capitulated. When they talk about ground presence in Iran, they're saying, welcome, we're waiting for you. That's what their foreign minister is saying very openly. He's also said that the door for diplomacy has been shut. They have no trust. Negotiations are over. For Iran, it almost seems like it doesn't matter till our last breath. We're going to fight now, since that's the decision that the US has taken. We're not backing off. You kill us, but we will not end this till the time it is actually over, till our last fighter. That seems to be the stance that Iran is taking. There are all these reports that the number of missiles that they were firing has reduced, number of drones, but the fact is it is still not gone. And they're still continuing with whichever way. And what has happened in Arad and Dimona, and that is proof that Iran is far away from being out from the fight. Do you read it the same way?
To a degree. There is definitely Iran is part of the game. It's part of responding. Capability were diminished, but nevertheless, Iran is able to respond. And what we see today in Arad and Dimona is a demonstration of that. At the same time, we do know that the President of the United States is looking for an exit road. He cannot leave this scene without having some kind of achievement, in particular on the Hormuz Straits issue. He was ready today to escalate very, very high by saying that if Iran does not open the strait within 48 hours, essentially one by one, Iranian power plants are going to be hit one after the other, starting with the largest of one. This is a very major threat. If true, it could be that Iran could be darkened. He put 48 hours, 2 days, and I cannot see him getting out of this threat. He takes it seriously. So the question of what would be the impact on Iran at this point. So both sides going up in terms of escalations. I know that there are also efforts to try to negotiate on the sides, including apparently with Russia interventions. It's possible that those threats are a way in order to escalate down, but I think the next 2 days are going to be very much fateful for this war. I thought that the war could not continue for more than a week because it's really consumed much of the energy.
Dr. Cohen, and this is very interesting that you also mentioned this, that symbolic win in the Strait of Hormuz, is that what the off-ramp is going to be for the US to really get out of this? Because Trump has already declared that we've won, but then they continue and the war continues, and then the threats continue. They could have exited perhaps after the elimination of the supreme leader of Iran on the first day. That was a symbolic enough, but that didn't happen. They went on. They said 4 to 5 weeks. We're already in week 4. And now it's the Strait of Hormuz with this 48-hour deadline. Is the Strait of Hormuz now that symbolic win that Trump probably wants before they exit? Because Iran doesn't seem to be on a timeline at this point. It's a fight for survival. It's the US which is on a timeline, and more so Trump with the midterms coming in.
Well, the United States and this president cannot live without having shown some kind of what you call victory. With the Strait of Hormuz being still closed, the fact that the 420 or 30 kilogram of highly enriched uranium, 60%, are still not recovered. It would be, and he put the whole thing about the war, about the nuclear issue, it would be very difficult for him to choose entry point and just to leave. So he needs to have some kind of achievement. I think the decision to put these threats, in order to put a very real pressure on Iran, this is a very concrete pressure. Iran power could be get off, and Iran could be darkened. So, and he locked himself into this threat. So the pressure on Iran right now is very, very strong, more than before. And I think that you're right that so far Iran did not show much reasons to capitulate. But with that kind of pressure, we'll see what will happen.
Strait of Hormuz.
It's a gamble. It's definitely a gamble.
Wasn't it always a big gamble? Because that's how Iran had mentioned it, that you come after us, we'll go right after all your bases in West Asia, and Strait of Hormuz is going to be blocked. They said it. They even demonstrated it in one of their war drills shortly before the war really started. So the writing was on the wall. They said we're going to do what we're seeing happen as of now. But Strait of Hormuz remains blocked. The regime in Iran very much intact, and that's what their own Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, said in that Senate hearing. And as far as their strikes are concerned, it still continues, even though they are diminished. And as far as the uranium which was enriched, the 460 kilograms or 440 odd kilograms, that's not been recovered. There is no win for the US to really showcase, apart from the fact that they caused a lot of destruction, which you would anyways expect from the toughest military in the world. So as you rightly mentioned, that they're looking for something to come out of this to say, yes, we did it, we've achieved it, that's what we went in to do, and we've come out of it doing just that. But in the midst of all of this, where do you see this one heading? Because we need to get a larger perspective of it as well. Israel is taking hits. Iran doesn't seem to be stopping. All the nations in the Gulf are under this fire. Where does the US really steer it from here?
I think there is a lot of talk behind the scene, in particular pushed by Qatar and Oman and others to try to reach some kind of solution. So I think with that kind of threat, maybe it's a way to open behind the scene a way for both sides to de-escalate. The de-escalate would include opening of the Strait of Hormuz, would be non-attack anymore of the United States. Maybe it would allow to have some kind of, because I understand that there is a lot of going on behind the scene in terms of negotiation. So publicly you escalate, you raise the threat very, very high, but at the same time there is also conversations towards de-escalations. We'll see what will happen. That's what I'm saying, that the next 48 hours are going to be a very fateful time.
Very quickly, Dr. Cohen, before we move further from here, let me just dip into different calls from the US side. First, they had called for the people of Iran to take charge of their government. This is in the initial hours of the conflict. That didn't happen because in January there was a major crackdown, a violent crackdown, and a lot of bloodshed in Iran. Then there were calls to other allies in the region that they should come and create a coalition to secure the Strait of Hormuz. You heard of Japan and Australia backing off from that, and along with many other European nations. Then there was a threat to these same nations that we'll remember this. Then there is a threat to NATO that you need to come forward and do it. UAE has now signed a joint declaration. A lot of the European nations, that also along with them is Japan and Australia. They made a U-turn saying, okay, fine, we'll take part in this coalition to secure the strait. But again, we've not seen them. UK has been the only one to now deploy their nuclear submarine to the region. At this point, and let me also add, the Gulf nations, there was a statement towards Saudi Arabia and Qatar that they should also get involved, but that hasn't happened either. Is the US largely isolated here? And that's something, did they not see this coming?
I think you're right. I think the United States was mistaken in terms of perception of number of aspects of this war, including the Strait of Hormuz, including there was some kind of belief or faith that given the damage on the Gulf states, they will join, perhaps symbolically, to the offensive forces of Israel and the United States. They have not done so. Everything they did was enormous amount of caution. And since they have not seen the Iranian being defeated, they are very, very cautious. Obviously, they're going to stay in the neighborhood. The United States may leave. Israel may go back to Israel, and they're going to stay in the neighborhood. So I think the United States has decided, this president has decided to escalate in terms of the threats in order to find a way out of it. But it's a big gamble, and we'll see what will happen. He gave 48 hours. By now, it's even less.
Dr. Cohen, thanks so much for taking all those questions and having this discussion with us. Your insights always add more clarity to analyze what's really happening in West Asia. And as you correctly mentioned, let me repeat it for our viewers, the next 48 hours, rather lesser now, are going to be very crucial to watch how this war continues, which is already in its fourth week. That was Dr. Avner Cohen.
A pleasure to talk to you. A pleasure to talk to you.